What up, y'all? It's Dev. Happy pre-release weekend. I'm here recording a couple of videos and then hoping to bump out to my pre-release before midnight hits, so I should go relatively fast. But pre-release is what we're talking about for this one. There are multiple very good pre-release guides on YouTube right now, and they're going to tell you what all the bombs are and the best commons and uncommons in every color and all that kind of stuff. So what I'm going to focus on instead today is 10 limited cards that maybe those guides aren't covering that I think you should know about. This does look like a pretty fun limited environment, not just for draft, but for sealed events like pre-release, right? There's a lot of really good looking cards in this set. There are fewer junk cards for limited than there usually are, which is continuing a trend we've seen over the last couple of years, but with a slew of such kind of playable looking cards, it's really easy to overlook a few cards that are just as good as some of the other cards that are getting so much attention. So enough intro, I think. Let's just look at 10 cards that I think you probably should have a read of before you go over to your pre-release this weekend. Starting with Prairie Dog. Now, Prairie Dog is 2 mana. It's 1 and a white for a 2/2 squirrel with lifelink at the beginning of your end step. If you haven't cast a spell from your hand this turn, it gets +1/+1 counter. For 5 mana, until end of turn, if you would put 1 or more +1/+1 counters on a creature you control, put that many +1/+1/+1 counters on it instead. So there's actually a lot of things in this set that care about +1/+1 counters, so this activated ability works with that, but there's also a lot of stuff in this set that has some version of this first line of text too, not the lifelink, although there is a lot of lifelink in the set, to be honest, but there's also this, if you haven't cast a spell from your hand, do a thing at the end of the turn, and Prairie Dog's pretty good with its own ability, so there's that. Basically, my thought on this is that a 2 mana 2/2 lifelink at the baseline is a pretty good creature, not embarrassing to play in your deck whatsoever. It can grow as the game goes on, whether you put +1/+1 counters on it in other ways or its own ability procs or whatever. So if you spend the 5 mana and don't do anything else, it's going to become at least a 4/4 lifelink, and I think for your 2-drop, that's not a bad investment. So I like a lot of things about this card, and I like it in a few different decks in Limited. I think just about anything white can find room for this, but especially plot, very obviously. Even down to just like baseline aggro decks that include white, I think this could be very good in. Anything tough enough to eat a cactus, you probably want to pay some attention to. But let's go ahead and move on to Shepherd of the Clouds, finish off the white cards here. There's only a couple of cards I want to look at in every color, and for some colors, just not even that many, but for white, there's a couple, right? Shepherd of the Clouds is 5 mana, 4 and a white for a 4/3 Pegasus, flying vigilance. When it ETBs, return a permanent card with mana value 3 or less from your yard to your hand. Turn that card to the battlefield instead if you control a mount. So I think that most people just read this card and they think like, oh, it's for the mount deck, who cares? But first of all, the mount deck in Limited looks pretty good, actually. A couple of people in the early access event made it look like it was actually a decent deck in Standard, too, so there's that. But not too sure about that one. But in Limited, if you do happen to have a mount out, this is a 4/3 flyer with vigilance. It's basically like a Sarah Angel with one less toughness. A little easier to cast too, 5 mana, 4 power, flying vigilance. Sarah Angel's always good. But this can put, a whole other permanent, not just a creature, but a permanent, from your yard back into play. And even if it doesn't put something back into play, it still puts something in your hand. So, Sarah Angel is a celebrated limited card. Gravedigger is a celebrated limited card, and this kind of brings the two of them together. So you get yourself a kind of must deal with permanent that attacks and blocks somewhat well. And can do both at the same time, which is pretty amazing, while also getting extra value apart from that. So your opponent might have a removal spell for your Shepherd, but do they have something to deal with the thing that you brought back? So I don't know. I just think a lot of people are looking over this card, and that's a mistake. Just, 5 mana is kind of a lot, but you get an awful lot for a 5 mana package on just an uncommon. Next is the only mono blue card that I want to look at today, and that's Marauding Sphinx. I've actually talked a little bit about this card, both like during the full set review, speed run or whatever, and I kind of hyped it up during preview season, but I don't know, I just kind of want to show it to you again. I just can't keep my mind off this thing in terms of like what cards might be good in blue and Limited. There are a slew of decent Limited cards that look good in blue, but Marauding Sphinx is one that I don't think is getting enough attention. 5 mana for a 3/5 Sphinx Rogue, flying vigilance in Ward 2. Whenever you commit a crime, Surveilled 2, this ability triggers only once each turn. It is pretty easy to commit a crime. Even in Limited, it looks very easy to commit crimes. This is an outlaw, in case you want that. It's got a big butt in the air, 5 toughness. It's actually able to block an awful lot of the stuff in this set. And there's really not a lot of flying to begin with. So anything flying vigilance like this or the last card is very, very good. Anything flying vigilance with a big old booty like this is great too. So like all of that. And then you get surveil triggers. So if you want to fill your graveyard or just fix your draws, get to your bombs faster, the card does all that too, while being a pretty stout body in the air that can attack for 3 and still block almost anything. So it's tough to get rid of too. Ward 2 is awesome. So I just really, really like this guy, and I don't think he's getting like any attention at all. But on to black. Let's look at Ambush Gigapede. Again, these are all cards I feel like people just are not talking about at all, and I haven't heard anybody, even in these like limited guides, bring up Gigapede. It's a pretty solid common for black. It does cost 6 mana for a 6/2, which isn't amazing, but it's an insect with flash, and when it ETBs, a creature an opponent controls gets -2/-2 till end of turn. So how this is often going to work out is your opponent swings in, flash this in, block something, kill just about anything with this guy on the ground, and then kill something else. Whether you line up weird blocks with one of your guys versus one of their guys, or you just kill something outright because of the -2/-2. I think this is often going to be kind of a 2-for-1, and you don't even have to line it up, too carefully in order to make that work. And then other times, this can just be, end of your opponent's turn, play a 6-power guy you'll be attacking with and also kill your dude. So all that's really good. I haven't heard anybody talk about this dude, but seems awesome to me. 6 mana is a lot, but we're talking sealed here. You'll probably get to 6, and I wouldn't play more than a copy or 2 of this guy. I'm not saying play a bunch of 6s, but, as far as 6-drop commons go, he's pretty balmy, I think. Swings the game fairly easily in your favor. But another black card I want to look at is Rooftop Assassin. This little dude is 4 mana for a 2/2 vampire assassin with 3 keywords, flash, flying, and lifelink. When he ETBs, destroy a creature that an opponent controls that was dealt damage this turn. Really, really easy to line this up, I think, too, especially with all the little mercenary dudes that are in the format. These little mercenary tokens that like half the cards in the set poop out. Just block with one of those, and then boom, flash, flying, lifelink. Get yourself a 2/2 evasive dude with an awesome keyword like lifelink, and destroy one of their dudes. Not too hard at all, So really kind of like this guy in limited. It's crazy that he's common too. He's not like a vampire nighthawk or anything, but pretty close, for what he actually is, and you might be able to pick up a couple of copies. I would say that extra copies of him get worse the more you play, but again, this is probably a lot easier to line up than it looks like. And even if you don't get the removal mode, like sometimes just, pop up guess who, flash, flying, lifelink 2/2 will swing games in and of itself, whether it's blocking or attacking or whatever. So actually just a sweet card. But there's also a couple of red cards I want to look at. Scale Storm Summoner. This is 3 mana, 2 and a red for a 3/3 human warlock. When it attacks, you create a 3/1 red dinosaur creature token if you control a creature power 4 or greater. So it's an outlaw. Got to mention that. But also really, really good in the power 4 or greater deck that looks to be like Gruul themed this time around. And I think that is actually a really good strat. But, you don't even have to be Gruul. You get this in red-black or something like that, and then suddenly you're probably doing some business. If this ever makes even one guy for you, you've paid 3 mana for 6 power, but if it makes more dudes, like if it attacks profitably like twice in a game and makes like 9 power in total, you're doing great for your 3-drop like uncommon. I just feel like this card is really hard to keep up with, especially, again, if you can get in them good attacks with it, maybe clear the board of blocker or whatever, kill your opponent's biggest guy, get in. And then suddenly, like, even if this dude dies, he kind of replaced himself. So, like, who cares? If he trades, he leaves behind a 3/1. So, awesome dude, especially in the mid game. He looks great. But there's also Hell-Spur Brute. Outlaw card. 5 mana Minotaur Mercenary with Trample. He's a 5/4 with Affinity for Outlaws. So, in limited, 5 mana 5/4 Trample is just kind of a fine rate by itself, but if you have even one outlaw, a 4 mana 5-power trample is great, but imagine that you have 2 outlaws, and there's plenty of cards in the set that like they're one kind of outlaw and then they make a mercenary token. So you just cast one of those on like turn 3, then on turn 4 this guy should cost like 3 mana, or turn 1 outlaw, turn 2 outlaw, then turn 3 5/4 trample is going to win a lot of games if you win first. Aggro doesn't look like it's great in this limited environment, just from what I can tell. But, if you do get the line where you win the flip and you get this guy on 3, then, it's going to take a long time for your opponent to catch up if they can. So, Guy just looks kind of good, you know, even if you're dropping him on turn 5 or 6, so long as he costs you like 3 mana or 2 mana or whatever, then you can do something else on that turn, and that's a pretty big burst as well. So just keep your eyes out for this dude. I want to try to play him in Standard in sort of the Red-Black Outlaws deck, but he hasn't been amazing there so far. That deck kind of wants to do more of an aristocracy sort of thing, but still, I haven't given up on him quite yet. I just really like this guy, and I think he's someone we should talk about more often. In green, there's one card, I believe. Gold Rush right here. 2 mana, 1 and a green for an instant. Create a treasure until end of turn. Up to 1 target creature gets +2/+2 for each treasure you control. Few cards in the set create treasure, obviously, so this could do +4/+4, +6/+6 some of the time. Just be an unbelievable, kind of out of nowhere combat trick that I don't think your opponents are going to expect in the early days of this limited environment, at least. So, but at the same time, also pays you back for playing it. 2 mana for a combat trick is basically the stopping point for combat tricks in limited. So as far as that goes, I think +2/+2 is pretty good. I mean, it's not like giant growth, but +2/+2 is going to blow out a lot of combat interactions, which you definitely want. And then a treasure token, again, it's like you only paid 1 for this, and then like you could also treat it as ramp and pay 5 drop on 4, 4 drop on 3. Like, all that seems pretty good, especially if you also get to like keep your creature and the opponent loses theirs on blocks or something. Just kind of gassy. And then late in the game, obviously, if you have like 3 treasure tokens, they let like a 2/2 unblocked and it just hits for 8. Like, that's definitely things you can do in this limited. There's a bunch of rares especially that care about treasures, so if you get a couple of bomby things that rare or mythic that create treasures or whatever, this card just becomes instantly good. So keep an eye out for it. But we also got to talk about Jim Lightfoot. Am I going to make the truly outrageous joke again? That joke is truly. This is 4 mana, 2, a white and a blue for a 3/3 legendary human scout with flying in vigilance at the beginning of your end step. If you haven't cast a spell from your hand this turn, draw a card. Sarah Angel again, they took 1 mana off the cost of Sarah and they took 1 PT off the cost, but still, flying vigilance thing. And this is probably the best version of this ability. I was talking about this on Prairie Dog, but yeah, at the beginning of your end step, if you haven't cast a spell, draw a card. This works with plot, but it's also just generally good in any sort of, control-y strategy. Strategy? Is that a word? Category strategy. I can make that a portmanteau, but I'm not going to bother myself with it now. Just a decent little strategy right here. And you can plot, and I just said that, but you can plot stuff that doesn't cast spells from your hand. But in control, you can just like pass with a counter spell or a flash creature or a removal spell and draw extra cards like every turn, which is kind of even if it's not attacking profitably, which it probably is, but even if it's not, then something your opponent has to deal with because you're just going to outvalue them. So really good in limited, no play in standard ever, but definitely hits the ceiling in limited. Next is, and I believe last, is Baron Bertram Greywater. This is 4 mana, 2, a white and a black for a 3/4 legendary vampire noble. Whenever 1 or more tokens enter the battlefield under your control, create a 1/1 black vampire rogue creature token with lifelink. Its ability triggers only once each turn. You can pay 1 and a black and sack a creature or artifact to draw a card. I haven't really taught much about this guy at all this previous season, but neither has anybody else, and I've seen a couple of pre-release guides, and I haven't really seen anybody mention this dude either, which is nuts, because he does seem like at the very least a signpost uncommon for black-white, Kambal being the sort of bomb rare for this strategy in limited. But definitely kind of doing the thing Orzhov wants to do, right? So not just mercenary tokens, but there's a bunch of other stuff that creates tokens in this set, and treasure tokens and stuff like that too. So pretty easy, I think, to get at least a few rogues off of this, and that is fantastic. Draws you cards, too, if you want to do it. Sacrifice artifact tokens to draw cards as well. That's kind of nice. There are artifacts in this set that care about being sacrificed or sacrificing other artifacts, so you can do some cool stuff. So interesting setups on, like, 4 different axes with this one guy, but even if you're just using him to, like, do what he's supposed to do, and, like, oh, I made a mercenary, so I get 2 1/1s, like, that's pretty good. Board in a box with decent PT for the cost. So really like this guy, and this is probably the part of every SPMTG video where Dev has to overrate an Orzhov legend, but overall I do think not enough people are talking about the guy. But I believe that is all I've got for this one. Again, there are plenty of channels with amazing pre-release guides, and I just really came up against the wall this season. Didn't have a whole lot of time for pre-release guides, but I did have just enough time to throw together 10 cards I don't think are being talked about enough for limited. Kind of pre-release or limited sleepers, if you will. So hope you enjoyed it. Go have fun at your pre-release. I probably won't get this uploaded by midnight. It'll probably come out a little bit later, but still, we got all weekend to play this brand new set, and I hope you enjoy the Cowboys. But anyway, I'll see you later, partner. Giddy up on the pre-release. I've been dead from the place. Do all the YouTube stuff, like the video, sub to the sandwich, check out the Patreon to support the content, and I'll be back again very soon. Love you guys. I was going to just say bye. That's not how I do things around here. Spread love and be kind.